Hey, it's Pete at Pete's Snake Bite Kit. Thanks for coming by and checking out my YouTube again. We're doing a fuel pump cover-up. Let's take a closer look. You know, I mentioned before I used to be a technician for a living, and over the years I've said a lot of bad things about engineers and how they design cars and things. I've said, hey, this isn't easy to get to. Who's a moron that designed this? And so many times on my car I stopped and said, am I making this hard for myself later? Or is there a way to make this easier if I've got to access this? And the fuel pump was one of those things. I cut a hole in the floor of the trunk, one for clearance, because the fuel pump would actually hit the floor of the trunk and run out of room. But the other is, even if I had room, I'd have to drop the tank to get to the fuel pump the way it was mounted. So I wanted an access hole in the floor of the trunk if I ever had to change a fuel pump or the cinder. Let's take a look at that. So the way I got this from Hurricane, and before I went all crazy with Dynamat, this was the floor of the trunk, and the fuel pump stuck up through here. So we got an interference issue. But even if I didn't have an interference issue, I did not want to drop the tank, which isn't a big deal, but I wanted an access hole. So that's why I made up this plate. Here's what I chopped out of there. Don't need that anymore. And I'll show you what I made to cover this up and make access. So I got some aluminum and got it in the vise. I was actually able to bend it and get a pretty straight bend on it. And then what I did is drilled the holes that are going to match the holes in the trunk. I'll show you that in a second. What I did next is I cut some MDF to match because I needed to space it up off of the floor just a little bit. The screws going down through these holes, I've talked about this before. I didn't want to mess with nuts on the other side that I can't even get to. So I inserted these cert nuts or rib nuts or whatever you want to call them. And this one works really well for me. There are heavier duty ones if you're putting them into steel and you want to, use it for something that has a bigger load on it. These have worked really well for what I've used so far. And, the fiberglass is almost 3/8 of an inch thick in most places. So where these lock in, they seem to lock in pretty well. And I dose them up pretty good with red Loctite. Here it is for a trial fit. I think it turned out pretty good and looks like it fits. You won't see this when the carpeting and everything is done in the trunk. It'll be carpeted, but I think I'll paint it black just so it looks finished in the meantime.